some ethics committee came out and said you have multiple violations of the Hatch Act, saying that you're mixing politics and government business. And they're threatening, if you don't come testify, to subpoena you. Where does that stand? What do you say about it?
Well, it'd be good if everybody had a quick tutorial on the Hatch Act, what it is and what it is not. It's not even clear to us here at the White House, according to White House counsel, that the Hatch Act applies to assistance to the president. It's not even clear what the Hatch Act allows. I would be the first, we think I'd be the first member of the West Wing to ever be hauled in front of Congress to talk about the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act means that you can't advocate for or against the election of an individual. And if I'm talking about the failures of Obama-Biden care, if I'm talking about the fact that 28 million Americans have no health insurance, that's a fact. If I'm quoting what some of the candidates say about the other candidates, I'm just repeating the news to you as I read it that day. You know what they're mad about? They want to put a big roll of masking tape over my mouth because I helped as the campaign manager for the successful part of the campaign. I helped in many ways for the president and the vice president, who were our two greatest assets, and they won that election over the other two. But I helped by being on television, by being on radio. I helped, and they want to silence me now. This is my First Amendment rights. They want to chill free speech because they don't know how to beat him at the ballot box. They were hoping that the other office of special counsel would do the job. But it's look, we're not even, and even if the Hatch Act applies, our position is I haven't violated it.
Well, and we had the president on about 10 days ago, and we asked him whether or not he was going to take the advice of the special counsel and fire you. He said, nope, you're doing your job, and it all comes down to freedom of your speech, in his estimation.
But also, and let's just make clear, the White House counsel's office issued an 11-page letter about 12 days ago. I'll post it on Twitter today. I know Twitter people just want to read 280 characters, but everybody should read this letter because White House counsel's office makes very clear what is and isn't at foot here. The other thing is that people should take a look at Crew. People are raising money on Twitter for Crew. Crew thinks of itself as a watchdog agency. Go look at who's part of Crew. If they want to become household names, I'm happy to help them out. Let's see if they can take the Klieg lights a little bit. They are a left-wing propaganda machine of provocateurs who are trying to weaponize the Hatch Act. Many of them have worked for Democratic senators in the past and left-wing groups in the past, and they don't like the fact that I'm so effective at a tiny piece of my job. By the way, I hold forth on policy on your show and out on the White House driveway constantly talking about policy. They don't want to cover that. It's too hard to understand.
This is Kellyanne Conway all over the map in her attempts to downplay her blatant Hatch Act violations. The Hatch Act, to be clear, is a 1939 law that prohibits employees of the executive branch, except the president, vice president, and certain other designated officials, from engaging in some forms of political activity, like affecting elections or going about its activities in a partisan manner. And that includes Kellyanne Conway disparaging Democratic presidential candidates while speaking in her official capacity during television interviews and on social media. And she brings out literally every excuse in the book. First, she says that she needs a tutorial, that she doesn't know what the Hatch Act is, which is ironic considering Trump ran as the law and order candidate. And now his senior advisor is on national television giving the White House equivalent of, well, I had no idea you couldn't drink and drive, officer. Is there a sign somewhere? Then she complains that she'd be the first West Wing member to face consequences for violating it. But that's not a defense, that's an embarrassment. We've gone, what, almost 100 years since the Hatch Act came into being, in which West Wing employees somehow, by the grace of God, managed to not neglect the law? And clearly, she's suggesting that violations like hers have occurred before, and that she's the only one who's being held to account for it. And she does this without proof, because if she had to actually validate her claims, well, it'd be a much shorter interview. And then, after a deluge of excuses, she actually goes on to explain the Hatch Act, because nothing screams, I didn't even know this was an offense, quite like defining it. No, officer, I didn't know I was speeding, except for the fact that I was going 85 and this is a 45-mile-per-hour zone. But then, in a wild move that shows just how much disdain Kellyanne has for the law, she comes dangerously close to breaking it again on national television. She sets off slamming Joe Biden, whom the Trump administration has already decided is the presumptive Democratic nominee, by renaming Obamacare to Obama-Biden-Care before using it as a proxy with which to bash Biden. And she does this literal seconds after she defines the Hatch Act as precluding her from advocating for or against the election of an individual. And then, of course, we have the main act, the Republican victim show, because that's the actual cornerstone of the Republican Party. complaining about silencing conservative voices, which is ironic considering that Republicans don't actually represent the majority of Americans in any way, shape, or form. Trump is president despite losing the popular vote by 3 million votes. The Electoral College and the Senate are inherently undemocratic, and gerrymandered House districts ensures that our government in no way represents the American people. But sure, conservative voices are repressed. As far as Kellyanne Conway and the rest of the Trump administration are concerned, they should be able to do whatever they want, even if that means breaking the law. And if they're called out for it, then it's simply the whole world out to get them. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans considered themselves the party of personal responsibility, way back in the days of 2019. And it doesn't look like this situation is going away for Kellyanne. Henry Kerner, chief of the White House's Office of Special Counsel, who was appointed by Trump, will testify before Congress on Wednesday and defend his decision to call for her firing. Conway herself was invited, and the committee plans to subpoena her if she fails to appear. So Kellyanne can scoff at the whole process and even go so far as to fly in the face of efforts to hold her liable, but unluckily for her, the days of zero accountability are behind us.